Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive, profound shift in how the entire world operates. For a long time, we all kind of pictured the internet as this utopian, borderless space, right? A place where information, business, and communication just flowed completely freely. Well, that era is ending. We are rapidly transitioning into a modern geopolitical battleground, where controlling the digital realm is literally just as critical as controlling physical land. Okay, let's dive into this. There is a stark contrast between that decades-old vision of the internet and the reality we're actually facing today. The old view was simple, a single interconnected global network. The new reality? The internet is now a highly strategic geopolitical arena. Governments aren't just casually participating in the internet anymore. They are actively competing over the infrastructure, the data, the platforms, and the cybersecurity that make the whole shebang work. And that brings us to the core issue. The modern question isn't simply who controls the internet. Honestly, that's just way too broad. The real urgent question is this: who controls the specific critical digital parts that a country entirely depends upon? Think about it for a second. If a nation relies on a foreign actor for its essential digital lifeblood, who really holds the power? To understand this massive paradigm shift, we're going to break it down step by step. Our roadmap for this explainer covers defining digital sovereignty, the infrastructure of power, 3 global approaches, the splinternet threat, and finally, a hybrid digital future. Let's get right into it. Section 1, defining digital sovereignty, a new kind of territory. So to understand the 21st century, we actually have to completely redefine the very concept of national borders. What exactly is digital sovereignty? Well, it's a country's ability to maintain meaningful control over its digital infrastructure, its data, and its critical digital services. Historically, national sovereignty was all about physical stuff, right? Territory, energy, food, the military. But today, physical borders mean absolutely nothing if a nation's communications, cloud storage, and software ecosystems are entirely dependent on foreign actors. If you don't control your digital infrastructure, your strategic independence is highly, highly vulnerable. And why is that vulnerability so incredibly dangerous? Because the internet isn't just a communication tool anymore. It's evolved into the foundational infrastructure of modern society. We're talking banking, governments, hospitals, transportation, media, military security. They all completely depend on digital networks. Think about the domino effect here. A disruption in a single critical digital system doesn't just, crash a website. It spirals through all these vital physical sectors, literally paralyzing a society. Control over this digital infrastructure directly translates to massive economic and political influence. Let's move to Section 2, the infrastructure of power, and see how this builds as the invisible becomes visible. We so often think of the internet as this invisible cloud, but to really grasp digital sovereignty, we have to make the invisible visible. Cloud computing might just seem like a standard commercial service, but it actually supports enormous portions of the global economy. So countries are now asking a rhythmic series of very tense, high-stakes questions. First up, who actually owns the physical infrastructure that your government systems and financial institutions run on? Second, where is the data physically stored? The location matters immensely because it dictates legal jurisdiction, it dictates national security, it dictates economic intelligence. If your citizens' data is just sitting on a server in another country, governed by another country's laws, do you really have sovereignty over it? And third, who has legal access to it? Let's cap off those first 2 questions by imagining a severe geopolitical crisis. If foreign companies control these absolutely vital assets, what happens to a nation if that access just disappears overnight? These are no longer just IT questions. They're the ultimate strategic questions. Now add artificial intelligence into this mix, and the equation changes entirely. AI requires massive computing power, advanced microchips, absolute oceans of data, and highly specialized talent. It takes tens of thousands of specialized chips just to train a single advanced AI model. The nations that control these resources gain an unbelievable strategic advantage. We're witnessing a brand new, incredibly high-stakes technological competition over who will literally build and control the computing infrastructure of our future. The virtual web actually relies on very real, very physical geopolitical assets. Undersea cables carry enormous amounts of international data. Satellites provide absolutely critical connectivity during crises. Data centers house the world's information. These physical installations can be targeted, they can be controlled, and make no mistake, they are increasingly being treated as critical geopolitical assets by global powers. Section 3, 3 global approaches. Let's look at how nations are actually reacting. With the stakes being this high, how are different nations responding? Well, here are three distinct strategies currently in play. First, China provides a really clear example of building a massive domestic ecosystem. With state support and huge capital, they've developed major domestic platforms, payment systems, and search engines that operate at an enormous scale, offering significant domestic alternatives to global platforms. Then we have Europe. The European Union takes a different path, focusing heavily on regulation, data protection, and establishing strict legal frameworks. Their goal isn't necessarily isolation, but ensuring that foreign tech companies play by European rules, thereby maintaining their strategic autonomy. Finally, Russia has placed a strong emphasis on resilience and independence, primarily driven by geopolitical tensions and sanctions. They're focusing on ensuring their infrastructure can survive even if access to foreign software and hardware is completely cut off. So the crucial point is this. Platform dependence is a massive vulnerability. When millions of people in a country rely heavily on foreign social networks, messaging apps, and digital payment systems, those platforms essentially become that country's entire information ecosystem. It doesn't mean foreign platforms are inherently bad, but it creates a really deep strategic dependency. And as we've seen, that dependency becomes incredibly dangerous the exact moment political or economic relations between those countries start to deteriorate. Section 4. The splinternet threat and the danger of fragmentation. So what happens if every country decides to pull up the drawbridge and build completely separate, walled-off digital ecosystems? The result is what analysts call the splinternet. Visually, think of a shattered mirror. Instead of one global, beautifully interconnected web, we get deep, deep fragmentation. We're talking different technical standards, conflicting regulations, entirely different platforms, walled-off data rules, and completely isolated AI systems. It's an internet completely shaped by national borders and geopolitical competition, rather than open connection. Section 5. A hybrid digital future. Connected, but armored.
So, are we doomed to lose the global internet entirely? Well, the most realistic outcome is a hybrid system. But what does that actually mean? It means people and businesses will likely still communicate and operate across borders. Information is still going to circulate globally. But layered underneath that everyday global connectivity, countries will build deep strategic digital armor. They're going to divide the underlying infrastructure, the regulations, and the hardware into competing technological ecosystems just to protect their sovereignty.
And this brilliantly illustrates our main takeaway. The 21st century is adding another dimension to global power, and that's digital capability. For centuries, power was measured by territory, population, and military strength, right? Now, digital capability is the new dimension. A country that can secure its own communications, protect its data, and produce critical technological components from a position of strength possesses true 21st century sovereignty. They aren't disconnecting from the world, they're just ensuring they aren't totally dependent on it. I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Can a country remain globally connected while still maintaining strategic control over its digital destiny? How nations balance this tension will entirely determine not just who leads the next technological revolution, but what the fundamental fabric of the internet will look like for generations to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the infrastructure around you.